The guys at Fantasy Football Hub have been kind enough to offer any FPL TV viewer a huge 25% discount on membership if you get signed up before the season starts. By becoming a member of the Hub, you'll gain access to one of the fastest growing fantasy football communities with a range of brilliant fantasy tools. This includes team reveals from the top FPL managers, extensive Opta stats, head-to-head player comparisons, fixture difficulty tables, articles, and much, much more. To claim this 25% discount, simply click the link in the description box below or use the discount code FPLTV25 when signing up. Hey guys, and welcome back to the Fixture Watch. With the Premier League fixtures now released, in this episode we're going to use the official FDR ratings to determine which teams look to have a good or bad run of fixtures in the opening 5 game weeks. Now, before looking at the complete FDR table, it's firstly very important to note that Game Week 1 looks to be a blank game week, with only 8 fixtures being played on the opening weekend. This is because, due to Man City and Man United's exploits in Europe this season, they've now both been given an extended 30-day break, which will therefore see them miss the opening weekend and return in time for Game Week 2. It's still unknown on when these games will get played, so all I can say is to keep note of this, because if their fixtures aren't simply moved into midweek of Game Week 1, then that means that United, Man City, Aston Villa and Burnley will all blank in FPL for the opening weekend. It also means that once the games do get rescheduled, then these 4 teams should have a double game week to look forward to. So let's now look to the full FDR table and see which teams have been gifted a favourable start to the Premier League campaign. Also, to keep things simple, I've put the 4 teams with that potential blank game week at the bottom for now. Sitting at the top of the FDR table is Spurs, with 4 of their opening 5 games having a difficulty rating of 2 according to FPL. I'll admit that before the fixtures got released, I felt pretty comfortable in avoiding Spurs altogether to begin this season, and that still may be the case. However, now being gifted a decent run of opening fixtures, which includes home games against Everton, Newcastle and West Ham, that policy may be worth a rethink. Defensively, Tottenham only managed an abysmal 7 clean sheets last season, and that really is a poor tally, with only relegated Bournemouth and Norwich keeping less. For this reason, the defence does seem a no-go regardless of fixtures, but it will be interesting to see which fullback can nail down the left-back spot, with Ben Davies, Danny Rose and Ryan Sessegnon all coming in at a cut price 5 million, as opposed to the majority being 5.5. In terms of going forward, they did fare a bit better, with 61 goals scored last season placing them 6th best. But with Mourinho at the helm, my concerns are twofold. Are Spurs ruthless enough to really turn teams over, and therefore provide a better chance of big FPL hauls? And are they consistent enough to make their options longer term assets that we can trust? They rarely strung together a long run of good results last season, and their form was quite sporadic. Considering their strong opening fixtures, which do last until Game Week 9, then it certainly makes Son and Kane both worthy of consideration. And if I am going to opt for their attack, then personally I won't be looking any further beyond those 2. Another side towards the top of the FDR table to begin this season is Chelsea, who face Brighton and West Brom either side of Liverpool, before then facing back-to-back home games against Palace and Southampton. Now, unlike Spurs, who I wasn't too keen on prior to the fixture release, Chelsea were a side I had a bit more interest in, certainly from an attacking point of view. Chelsea were the 3rd highest scorers last season, and although their total of 69 goals was only 8 better than Spurs, the stat that I found very interesting is their big chances from last season. Champions Liverpool, the 2nd highest scorers last season, eclipsed Chelsea's goal scoring with 85 to 69. But for big chances, the Reds had 109 whilst Chelsea had 107, almost level pegging. 107 big chances for Chelsea also put them way ahead of Leicester, United and Spurs with 88, 86 and 69 respectively. This goes to show that Chelsea created many great goal-scoring opportunities last season, but simply didn't have that clinical finisher up front to take advantage. And hopefully this is where the natural goal-scoring exploits of Timo Werner could come in. Because he's new to the Premier League, he still remains a maybe for me. But with 95 goals in 159 for Leipzig, he'll certainly be hard to ignore, especially considering Chelsea's kind run of opening fixtures. Behind Werner, there's lots of creativity there as well, with Pulisic flourishing toward the end of last season, Mason Mount coming off the back of a very impressive season of his own, and the very talented Hakim Ziyech now joining their ranks too, a player who is known for his superb assist potential. Following a very impressive return to the Premier League last time out, Sheffield United begin this season with a decent set of opening fixtures, facing 2 home games against Premier League new boys in the opening 5 game weeks. The Blades built their success on superb defensive work last season, conceding just 39 goals in 38 games, a defensive record bettered only by 3 teams, Man United, Man City and Liverpool. They were such a reliable backline to turn to in FPL last season, and for that reason, understandably, their prices have been hiked up significantly. The 5.5 million for fullbacks Ender Steven and Baldock is a big ask, but with these nice opening fixtures, you wouldn't put it past them to score handsomely in the first few weeks. If 5.5 million is too much for your liking though, then perhaps the ever-present centre-backs could be the value picks at 5 million. With their goalkeeper Dean Henderson also having a superb season last year, and just like Nick Pope having his price risen to 5.5 million, I have to say I'm pleasantly surprised to see their new goalkeeper signing Ramsdale come in for 0.5 million cheaper. For 5 million, he could be a very handy way into this Sheff United backline as a decent set and forget goalkeeper. I think he offers that nice middle ground if you don't want to spend the extra on the likes of Nick Pope, but perhaps aren't fancying any of the 4.5 million options. As we look back to the FDR table, the rest of the teams in the top half are all level on 14 and all have a mixed bag of fixtures. Ultimately, it's up to you to decide whose fixtures you best prefer, so feel free to pause this video and have a good look for yourself. Southampton avoid any red fixtures for the opening 4 weeks, and after that tough trip away to Chelsea in Game Week 5, they then face another 3 very favourable fixtures. With this being the start of a new season now, it's difficult to really take form into account. But if we are looking to form at the back end of last season, then Southampton certainly tick that box. After lockdown, the Saints picked up 18 points in the final 9 games. That was the 3rd highest amount behind only Man United and Man City, so they really were one of the most informed teams at the back end of last season. In those 9 games, they only lost once, so it'll be very interesting to see if they can carry that confidence over into this new season, and I guess there's a chance of it considering the break has been a lot shorter this time round. With Southampton, there's some decent options right through the squad I think, with McCarthy at just 4.5 in goal, Stuart Armstrong in midfield at a tempting 5.5 million, and of course last season's very reliable bonus point magnet Danny Ings, all worthy of consideration to start this season. Also on 14, we've got the champions Liverpool, who are a no-brainer regardless of their fixtures, and also Fulham. Like Southampton, they too avoid red fixtures for the opening 4 game weeks, and therefore Alexander Mitrovic remains in my thinking for Game Week 1. We've also got Leicester opening with some decent fixtures, so Golden Boot winner Jamie Vardy could be worthy of consideration. He did tail off in the second half of last season and does come in at an expensive 10 million. But given these fixtures, and considering that James Maddison is now returning from injury, there's certainly justification in owning Vardy for Game Week 1. New boys West Brom also avoid any red fixtures to begin this season, but with them, if we look beyond the colours, it doesn't look that great. There's Leicester, a trip to Goodison, Chelsea, Burnley, all potentially tough games for West Brom, and they are a bit of an unknown this season. The only player in my considerations from them was Matías Pereira, who did post some outstanding stats for the Baggies last season. One to watch definitely, but maybe just one for the watch list for now. So let's now look towards the bottom of the FDR table and see which teams have been given a much more difficult run of games. Also, if you're enjoying the Fixture Watch, then please consider supporting my channel by dropping a like and most importantly getting subscribed to FPL TV. You can also hit the notification bell so you always know when a new FPL video goes live. A side towards the bottom of the FDR table to start this season is Arsenal, who in the opening 5 game weeks faced the dreaded away trips to both Liverpool and Man City, last season's top 2. Despite facing these 2 nightmare away trips early on, if we forget the long term for a moment, it is worth noting that in the opening 2 game weeks, Arsenal boast one of the best starts in FPL, facing New Boys Fulham in Game Week 1 before then hosting West Ham. On paper, 2 very nice fixtures. Arsenal scored a whopping 9 goals against Fulham in the 2 games against them 2 years ago, and Craven Cottage in particular was a very happy hunting ground for them, with the Gunners winning 5-1 there. Of those 9 goals, 3 of them were scored by Aubameyang, and what a prospect he looks to be this season, now being reclassified as a midfielder. Admittedly, at 12 million, it was looking very hard to squeeze in the world-class forward, but now, with the knowledge that both United and Man City blanking Game Week 1, that does free up a lot of cash to own Aubameyang for the opening 2 games. And because he is a premium 12 million, at least then we have the luxury of simply moving him to any other midfielder we please, for example Fernandes or De Bruyne once they return to action. Their defender Kieran Tierney is also a strong consideration of mine this season, but the longer term fixtures may just put me off for now, with Arsenal not often reliable for clean sheets even at the best of times. I also think that Saka in midfield at 5.5 million is absurdly good value this season, and providing Willian doesn't take his place in the side, he's a budget enabler I may start the season with. Beyond these opening 5 game weeks, Arsenal then face Leicester in Game Week 6 and Man United away in Game Week 7, so they really do have it tough after the first 2 game weeks. Another side with a seemingly difficult run to open this season is West Ham, who do open their campaign at home to Newcastle, but in the following 4 games face Arsenal, Wolves, Leicester and Tottenham, 3 of which are away from home. Before the fixtures were announced, there were a few hammers in my considerations to begin this season, with Bowen, Antonio and Souček all putting in very good performances at the back end of last season and securing their survival. In the 9 game weeks after lockdown, Antonio was the league's 2nd highest scorer with 8 goals, and despite him now being reclassified as a forward, I still see him as pretty good value at 6.5 million, with not many better in that price range. The same can be said for Souček, because at a bargain bin price of 5 million, at that price he does look to be an outstanding option. Because of the fact that Souček is predominantly a defensive midfielder, I'm not sure I can see him making my final Game Week 1 squad personally, especially now considering their very tough opening fixtures. But it is worth noting that in the final 9 game weeks last season, Souček scored 3 goals and more impressively had 18 shots. And when you think that's only 1 less than Jimenez had, or 2 less than Martial over those 9 game weeks, then it really shows that for 5 million he could end up being exceptional value, but only providing he continues to show this kind of attacking intent. All 3 players certainly on my watch list, but one's not likely to make the Game Week 1 squad. Sitting rock bottom of the FDR table is Premier League new boys Leeds, last year's championship title winners. Now, because Leeds do face a very tough opening to the season, where they face both Liverpool and Man City, it is worth remembering that Norwich City had the same deal last season, and they still managed to make a huge impression and offered a significant amount of FPL points. At the end of the day, fixtures aren't the be-all and end-all of FPL, so just because Leeds have a tough run on paper doesn't mean you have to avoid them at all costs. What I would say though is that Norwich came up last season with very impressive attacking stats, having scored 90 plus goals in the Championship. So, even though they conceded loads of goals against City, Liverpool and Chelsea in the opening 5 game weeks last season, Pukki and Cantwell, for example, were still able to rack up points. Now, in the case of Leeds, there's a bit of a contrast, because their impressive stats from last season came from defence. Last year, they kept 22 clean sheets, and in 46 championship games, only conceded 35 goals. To put that into perspective, that's 6 goals less than what Sheffield United conceded in their championship promotion campaign, so that really shows what a solid outfit Leeds are. For this reason, Leeds defenders were certainly on my radar to begin this FPL season. But when a team has a difficult run of fixtures, I think it's much easier in FPL for the attacking players to still pick up points. And I'm just not sure now if Leeds defenders can do quite as well in this opening run. Stuart Dallas, Luke Ayling and Alioski are all within my consideration still, with the latter potentially playing out of position. But if I do, it'll probably be on a rotation basis, so I'm not forced to play them in some of these tough opening games. With a difficulty rating of 15 in the opening 5 games, Crystal Palace also find themselves towards the bottom of the FDR table, with their first 2 away trips away to United and Chelsea. For Palace, it is these 2 away trips that put them far down the FDR table. But in isolation, their home fixtures actually look fairly decent, hosting Southampton, Everton and then Brighton. In fairness, Palace players haven't exactly been top of my shopping list during my pre-season tinkering, but there is one player in particular that has a very good chance of making my Game Week 1 squad. Their new defensive signing Nathan Ferguson could be one of the only playing £4 million defenders to start this season. Now, I'm not saying he's guaranteed to start, but that's certainly something I'll be watching during pre-season, especially if Van Aanholt remains out injured. Considering the way they ended last season, I'm not interested in any other Palace players, but providing Ferguson does start, he could be a very handy budget option, which can be rotated in for these decent home games and then put on the bench for the away trips. As for the 4 teams that blank in Game Week 1, well, Man United in particular have some very good fixtures from Game Week 2 onwards. So if I am to go without them, I may need a plan in place to bring them in once they return to action. Aston Villa look to be an easy avoid for now, whilst Burnley's fixtures improve from Game Week 3 onwards, and that's when I may look towards their defence. So that wraps up an information-packed opening episode of the Fixture Watch. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and if so, please get subscribed to FPL TV. Your support is always appreciated. I'll be back very soon with more pre-season content, so until then, FPL responsibly, and I'll catch you all very soon.